So today I'm going to answer your questions on the Press to Handstand. I recently put a post out and asked anyone to comment questions specifically around the press. I have done one of these before on a general Q&A. Today's is really focused on that press, the strength, the flexibility, and just the technique and the drills working towards it or fine-tuning the one you have already. So let's jump in with question number one. I'm wondering what ingredients you believe are key to lifting one's legs off the ground at the beginning of the press and how to train for them effectively. Compression drills, flexibility training, etc. More precisely, I'm looking to increase my air time during press hops, but I'm not sure how to proceed. Thanks and looking forward to your video. So we can really split the press up into three different components. We have the top position, which is obviously the handstand. Then we have the bottom position where you get your lift off or where you lift up from. And then we have the path of the press, so something the legs go through, something the hips go through, and something the shoulders go through. And that will be different if we're doing a Straddle press, a Pike press, a tuck press, etc. So what we're looking at here is that initial part where the toes come off the floor, and he's saying he's already doing some press hops. So one of the drills I really like is this type of movement. And I recently put out a video on it where we tested the position of the hip relative to the hands to work out how close you are to lifting your toes off the floor. It's a great drill to assess where you're at, how close you are to floating, but also what you need to work on. So initially I recommend everyone does that self-assessment. So go into that position and just try and get the hip on top of the hands. So just watch my position again and see where my hips get relative to my hands. So you'll see roughly there my hips are directly on top of the hands. Now if your hips are not on top of your hands, there's a couple of different ways we can attack this and try and bring the hips on top. The cool thing is you can work on these at the same time. So one, we could just work on planche strength, so taking the shoulders forwards and using more strength. And the other one is flexibility and compression and trying to bring the torso and the legs closer to each other. But just be a little bit careful with that second one. So when you look at your position and you want to try and get the hips on top and you're thinking about compression, if I compress but bring the torso to the legs, that's very different than bringing the legs to the torso. So I'd be training things like high hip planche holds. So if you're doing like tuck planche work or something like that, or you could actually just hold that position and take the shoulders as far forwards as you can. Turn the hands out a little bit more with that one. Try and push up into a protracted rounded back. And you can even bend the knees a little bit to really reinforce that protraction and just hold there for time. See if you can work up to like 10-15 seconds in that position. So that'll be working more the strength component. Flexibility, we want to be doing Jefferson curl, straddle pancake work, straddle good morning, that type of thing. Everything that's going to bring the torso and the legs closer together. And then the big one, if you are starting to get a little bit of a hop and a bit of a float already, just notice what happens to the legs as the toes come off. If your legs go backwards, it's making it harder for you. So if the legs go back, your shoulders need to go forwards even more, because if not, you're just going to drop back towards the feet. Ideally, when you get a lift off, your feet will go out to the side like this. Not this. Self-assess, see what you think you need to work on the most, whether it's the strength, the flexibility, and do a bit of both, but really attack those weaker areas where you have the most amount of potential for change. Okay, next question. Do you recommend wall-assisted press with back on the wall or glutes on the wall? Now there's two real variations of the back to wall press drill. There's one where we put all of the back against the wall and then peel down. Now that one's easier for the beginner to understand and to get the articulation down through the spine. But if you have a bit more control, only just putting the butt to the wall, then the low back, then the mid back would be my preference. So you can, the first one is putting everything against the wall. So my head, my back, my butt's against the wall, then I bring the legs down. Now I just peel off the butt, now try and get the low back on, mid back, upper back, tippy toes. So that was a little bit easier, especially if you're newer to this drill. Harder variation, but my preference would be to get the butt to touch by itself first and not put the back and the shoulders on. So butt's touching, back's off, now low back's on, now mid back's on, now upper back's on, tippy toes down. It's not ideal to use a post, definitely use a wall. Now ideally I would use the second one of that, unless you get into a point where your legs, when you put your back or your butt against the wall, your legs are sticking up in the air still. and you have a real big arched low back, that can people can get really stuck with that through the hip. So they get stuck here and not be able to turn the low back off. Oh, if I don't get the low back to touch, not be able to turn the pelvis over. So for most people, it would be a progression. First, all of the back on the wall, and then butt, low back, mid back. Okay, next question. Hi Paul, how do we develop the shoulder and core strength and other strength necessary to lift up? I have the strength to hold feet slightly elevated from the floor with split leg, slightly bended, but unable to press myself up. So this is where we either want to start to use partial range or eccentric reps to really focus on that path of the movement. So if you're lucky enough to be able to get the toes off the floor, but then get stuck, we just need to condition the path. Now there's a couple of ways of doing the pathway. We can just do a really slow eccentric. Now I'm assuming that you have a freestanding handstand, and I'm assuming you have quite a bit of strength. So all that means is that we can become quite planchy and come down as slow as possible. If you don't have the flexibility and need to bend the knees slightly, that's fine. So it'll just look a little bit like this. So going down really slow, and then you can start to work partial range. Now partial range can either be done with an eccentric as well, so you start at the top, you lower down, then come back up a little bit, and then slowly decrease the height of the target that you're going to, or you can start on that partial range. So if I had a couple of IKEA steps, weight plates, boxes, whatever you need to get the right height, come into this position, and then lift up, see if you can come back down again. If you can't get off that height, you just raise the box up. And then ideally over time, the point where you can lift your toes up to from the floor and the partial range will slowly meet, and then you'll create a full path. Someone else put, it's so close, very core strength and flexibility. Yeah, so really knowing what you need to work. Now, core strength's a funny one because it's not really, a lot of people think of core strength as closing the torso, so like a crunch or a sit-up. If you think of the press handstand, you don't actually need to do that. You need to lift, you actually need to open the body. So it's more like a posterior chain than an anterior chain movement. But if we just think of the core as something that connects the feet and the hands, and that opens us all up, so it's whatever happens in the middle of that system, then you can think of it that way. But just self-assess, go through that. Do you have the start position? Do you have the freestanding hold? Do you have that bottom position? You can get your toes to start to float, and then work something on the path, whether it's partial range or eccentric full range. Is it worth to train planche progressions while learning press to handstand? I would say definitely. Anyone who can hold a tuck planche or hold a real deep tuck handstand is going to have more upper back trap development that's going to really help you to open and close the shoulder in that position. But I can do a tuck planche and see how much the shoulders are strong, and I can do this open and closing movement. I don't even need to get my hip as far over because I can take out the control in the shoulders and lift up and down. Okay, please teach some drills to work on straight leg press to handstand, no split legs. The cool thing with all the different presses is basically it's the same drills, you just have your legs in different positions. Now for something like a pike press, so legs together, there is a little bit more demand on the upper back and shoulders because the legs stick out further. There is a little bit more demand on trying to take the hip over to more that 7 handstand position. So working anything like deep tuck positions, 7 handstands, and just flexibility through the thoracic and upper back is really going to help you. But then it's the same drills. So your bottom position, but now legs together instead of shoulder width apart. I'm trying to get hover there, doing the eccentric reps either against the wall or freestanding. So here, trying to stick the butt backwards, shoulders forwards like you do in the tuck handstand. Or doing that up against the wall. So butt touching, low back, mid back, upper back. You just have to work on pulling everything a little bit further that way because of the legs. Okay, how can I improve my handstand balance and awareness because I feel like I will fall when I try frog stand to handstand? I can push my body weight, but when it comes to balance, I fall most of the time. Any tips will be great. Thank you so much. So this is a great example of how important balance is. So just think to yourself, if you're holding a straight handstand and you can hold that easily, and you can have a conversation while you're holding balance, then you can do other things. Your body can put all of that energy into something else. So whether that's a shape change, a press handstand, a one-arm handstand, a handstand push-up, a lower to a frog stand, you can put 100% of your energy into that because you're not using any energy to balance. But what normally happens in those movements, someone might have a straight handstand that they can balance well, but as soon as they change the position of the hip or the shoulders, then that's new to them and they can't balance that position. So now they have to use 50% of their energy trying to rebalance all the time. So they only have 50% to work on the press or work on the handstand push-up or whatever they're trying to do. So basically we just need to come up with drills to help us balance throughout the path of the movement. So if you're doing something like a frog press to handstand, now this could be straight arms, it could be bent arms. So I'll do more of a straight arm version now because this is more about the press than the handstand push-up. So if I'm in a frog position like this, so now obviously that would be the ideal. I need to be able to balance throughout the movement. Open the shoulders up, maybe go up to straight, then come back down again. Now this would be a great balance work for you, is to come down slowly and try and pause. At any of these points, try and pause, find balance, and come back down. Well, what you'll probably find is there's areas of that movement that you really struggle with, and you just need to try and spend time closer to it. You might need a spot, you might need to use the wall in some way, or it might just be repetition of slow eccentrics. But you just want to fill the gaps where your balance is poor. Okay, coming back up from press to handstand is difficult. How to achieve that, please give some tips. Okay, so I'm assuming coming back up from press to handstand means that you've done an eccentric and you can't come back up again. So again, I would just work partial range reps. So if you can come down for a slow eccentric but you can't come back up, I would just start on a higher box, lift the feet up, try and come back down again. So if I go off like the couch here, so in this position, I find a point where I can lift off and come up, come back down again. If that feels okay, I'll slowly decrease the height. Play around with different leg positions as well. It might not be the really wide straddle position that works best for you. You might be better with slightly bent legs. Just find out the easiest path for you, whether you're using flexibility or strength or a combination of both. And start to feel the range. So you'll have the range on the way down from a balance point of view, and then going up, balance and strength to get back up. You just need to find the bits that you're struggling with and try and hang out there by using the partial range or using the wall to spend time there. Okay, now I think that's all the written questions. So let's jump into the video critiques. Okay, first one is from Julian. Okay, so Julian has a great press already. You can see there how he's using strength mainly to create especially the initial movement. So he's very flexible, but if we have a look at his start position, see how here his feet and his hips are, so his hips are on top of his feet, and as he comes forwards his feet are still flat. So even though he's walked into his flexibility range, I'd say here he's actually too close. So it's like a real deep forward fold position instead of a straddle forward lean to go into a press handstand. So then when he comes up, he's in that flex feet position and he's having to really planche forwards and nearly pike on the way up. What would be interesting would be to see Julian's straddle flexibility. Let's just see what he said. Handstand, I would like to know what are my weak parts. And I am not able to straddle enough. Yeah, so basically it is the straddle flexibility. I would work on the straddle flexibility. If you need to frog a little bit more, you just basically need to take the legs out to the side and less backwards, because at the moment in that start position, so you're in this position and then you're pressing from here and it's forcing you to go backwards. See now I actually wanted to point my feet, you keep yours flexed the whole time, which allows you to get like higher up through the hip, but it gets you a bit stuck and it sends your legs out so far to the back. So instead of being this close, like this, I would have hands forwards, come up onto tiptoes, then try and go out sideways. Now if you can't go out sideways because you're limited by straddle flexibility, just bend the knees as you go out. So go up to tiptoes, bend the knees, find that path. And obviously working on middle splits, working on your straddle flexibility is going to help. And you will just have to get used to the timing, because the timing will be different because you won't have to take your shoulders so far forwards. But it's going to use a lot less energy if you can do that more of a straddle pass instead of the pike position. The legs going out to the back, out to the side is going to be much easier once you get the flexibility and mobility. But great work, you've got a solid press already. So really, like any type of press, I'll stick up my first press somewhere here as well so you can see that. So your first press is never going to look pretty. Your 1 rep max of anything is never going to look pretty. Just get the press. Obviously don't injure yourself, but get it, and then you can build upon it, and then you can fine tune it. Okay, we actually have 2 more. So look at the hip position. So as he's walking in, how far he's having to planche the shoulders. And he just gets his hip to that point, but it's so maximal. So he's planching so much, but his hip is quite high. He's basically going to the point where he's just gets to that edge where he starts to lift the toes up. But because he's so far forwards with the shoulders, then you're going to feel like you're going to fall, and you can fall obviously. So basically it's working on flexibility. Because you have that planche strength, because you can get your hip there, you're so close. It would be really interesting just to like do some real hard stretching before you've done it, and then repeat the process and see how close you can get. That might be after real hard stretching, which just tells you just need to move the flexibility there. You look like you've got the strength already to do it. Just be careful you don't hurt your wrists or your shoulders when you do that. So it's basically just compressing more. One thing that you might be able to do is use socks on a smooth floor, or use some sliders and actually slide the feet in, so your movement goes like forwards towards your hands and then up in the air. So that can help people initially, is to get that sliding movement like an aeroplane taking off. At the moment yours is going like this in that direction, and then you're falling over there. So if you can do like an aeroplane going up and take off like this. I don't recommend doing that on this floor with toes like this. So slide in forwards and then up. That could help, but really flexibility is going to be your friend. So straddle, Jefferson curl, that type of thing. Oh, he did show a wall one as well. Yeah, same thing with the wall. If you look at his position in the wall, see how far his hands are away. So basically we're collapsing onto the wall. So you're just so far end of the planche position, which is too much for your body at the moment. So I'd prefer to see you work a little bit more flexibility. Try and bring those hands in a little bit closer. And then as your flexibility increases, you'll have something that you can control. At the moment, it's too much planche compared to your flexibility. So most people will be like that. They'll be one direction or over. They'll either have way too much flexibility for their strength, or too much strength for their flexibility. So trying then to go in the opposite direction will really help you. Now we have someone here who already has a press that's way better than my first press was. Nice solid straight handstand. Notice that when he's got a good catch position at the top, and he comes back through perfectly. So that's really good. I actually think when he messaged this, it was actually his first press to handstand. Yeah. Requested press. My goal was to get a press to handstand by the end of the year, and today, after working on a ton of the drills from your recommendations, this video is my first ever press to handstand. Awesome. So he's got a press, and like I say, that press looks way better than mine ever did. So congratulations on getting your first press. That's awesome. Things I would do to clean it up: so we have a good balance, we have good shoulder position, we have good hip position, just making the legs a little bit smoother, making it a little bit more graceful, so you're using less energy. So things to work on is a real clean eccentric, landing on tiptoes. This is really good for anyone. Try and think that you want to touch down very carefully with the toes to the floor, and the more you can be on your tiptoes, the easier it is going to be come back up again, because your hip height is still there, because you haven't dropped your feet down, which lowers the hip. So what we want to see, so a nice start position coming out to straddle or whatever press you're going to do, coming down as clean as possible, trying to have no areas where you drop, and then notice tippy toes just touch. And then if I want to put a second rep in, it's easier because I'm already at that start position. So what you see a lot of people do is, as they come down, they'll land like this. Hip drops over too fast, loses its height, and then you land on your soles of your feet instead of your tiptoes. Some of that will just be your body trying to escape from the demand of the strength or the flexibility. Now, I think I've got everyone's questions answered today. If I've missed anyone, I apologize. Let me know down in the comments as well if there's anything else, any other questions related to the press, and we can cover them down there. Now I'm planning on doing more of these, so I'm going to do a handstand push-up one, I'm going to do a general handstand one, and a one covering one-arm handstands. So I'll let you guys know when I'm asking for questions and video submissions for those. Any feedback will be great. Thumbs up and subscribe will be appreciated, and I'll speak to you next time. Thanks guys.